going all the way back to how he got started in the 70s, the influence he had, there's got to be people that either trained him to do what he did in the 90s, 2000, or influenced him negatively and taught him some bad habits. A lot of times in business, we'll bring an agent that comes from another company. That company, if they do forgeries, because that guy learned some of those habits at a different company before they brought it here. Like, how did you learn how to do this? Well, when I used to do mortgage, it was called creative financing. Oh my God, we don't do that. That's not the right way of doing business. So how do you yourself, when you look at somebody like this, someone must have taught him these bad habits?
Right. So it looks to me that it was somewhere around the time he went to Bear Stearns, which was his first really entry into the financial world. Because, as I just mentioned earlier, most people think of Epstein as a sex criminal. Based on my research, he's just as much a financial criminal as a sex criminal. But in the book, I try and go even further back to that in pursuit of, where this intelligence tie may have originally started. And, he was apparently had a British royal family connection as early as the early 70s, like 1971, when he was, in his 20s. He was supposed to be backpacking in Europe. There's some weird mystique around that particular trip that I note in the book. But after that, he, went to the Dalton school, which I think some people that looked into the case, after his second arrest are probably familiar with, because the man that hired him there, who is the headmaster of Dalton at the time, was William Barr's father, Donald Barr. And
Bill Barr, as in the former...
the two-time Attorney General. Yes, correct. And his father was a former... a veteran of the Office of Strategic Services, which is a precursor to the CIA. And then he went to Columbia and was sort of a talent scout, I guess, in a sense, because he ran a lot of programs at Columbia focusing on talented high schoolers. And it's very possible that Epstein was a very gifted high schooler in the New York area. He graduated high school very young. He went to the Interlochen Academy of Arts and was a very talented teenager. So it's very possible he may have met Donald Barr that way. But Donald Barr, for whatever reason, hires him to go to the Dalton school. And according to former students quoted by the New York Times, he showed a weird interest in partying with underage kids even then, and wanted to drink. And some claim they hit on him and all this stuff. And other people said that was normal at the Dalton school and all of that. And the reason for him leaving isn't quite clear, but he was sort of headhunted there by Alan Greenberg of Bear Stearns, and went and joined that particular bank. And Alan Greenberg, just a couple of years after he brought Epstein into Bear Stearns, became the head of Bear Stearns. So Epstein was sort of, from what I understand, seen his mentor was basically Greenberg, and Greenberg goes to the top of the bank, and so obviously that helps Epstein's career. He climbs the ladder pretty rapidly there, and then starts working with some of their elite clientele, the identities of which we don't exactly know, but based on the circumstances under which he left, it was related to an SEC investigation focusing on insider trading of the Bronfman family company, Seagram's, I believe. Seagram's. Yeah, so it seems like Edgar Bronfman, he may have been involved in advising him on some things. And what he was apparently well known for and talented in at Bear Stearns was advising people about tax law. So there may have been some sort of tax evasion stuff or something. I mean, he left under rather murky circumstances, and there's a lot of, differing opinions coming out of there. But in looking at the particular Seagram's insider trading stuff, and that the SEC was tipped off that Epstein knew something about it, and Epstein leaves, so there's no blowback for the bank, because at this point, right, his mentor is the head of the bank that could obviously have impacts all the way up at Bear Stearns, right? And another thing that's interesting is just a couple around that same time, the person who had been the legal counsel for Bear Stearns most of the time that Epstein was working for that bank became CIA director under Reagan, Bill Casey.
So these links, by the way, if you go on Donald Barr, because we went through that very quickly, Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr. Okay, so that's Donald Barr. When he was at Dalton, just to kind of put into perspective for the audience, how big of a deal is the school Dalton?
Well, from what I understand, it's kind of one of I'm not from New York City, and I've never been there, so I don't have like an insider understanding necessarily of that. But from what I understand, a lot of elite, wealthy people
went to the school,
send their children there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when he hired Epstein to become a professor teaching mathematics. This is a guy that's never had a degree before, right? Like Epstein never got a degree.
No, he would have not been eligible, as I understand it, to even teach in public school in New York.
How does that make any sense for him to get a job teaching even though he's never had a degree before?
Right. So Donald Barr apparently hired unconventional teachers and was known for this, right? But he actually left by the time Epstein started. Hiring decisions were apparently made in the spring. And that summer, Donald Barr left after having made those hiring decisions. So during most of Epstein's time there, it was another headmaster. And from what I understand, Donald Barr's him leaving the Dalton school was rather acrimonious. Like he was sort of forced out, it seems, by angry parents and some angry teachers.
Yeah. So apparently he was there till what? Summer of '94 is when you're forcing me to do so much research. It's not even funny.
I think it's like 74.
74. Yeah. That's summer of '74, and then Epstein started working months prior to that, right? Like in '73, teaching physics, and you don't have a 4-year degree. That's incredibly weird to me.
No, it's weird that he was hired, considering that he couldn't even have taught at public school.
Is this Epstein or Bill Barr's father we're talking about right here?
In
as far as who was
Epstein?
teaching?
No. Donald Barr hired Epstein.
Got it.
But Epstein didn't have a 4-year degree to teach anything, even in...
Yeah, he didn't graduate from undergraduate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So just think about it. And then, by the way, the one thing that's also pretty weird with this whole connection is Donald Barr wrote a book.
Space relations.
Yes, space relations. Published a science fiction novel that contained several prominent references to and descriptions of rape and sexual slavery.
Sex slavery. That's true. And that was published shortly after he left the Dalton school. So there's a weird mix here, right? But, I mean, you can't make any direct connection necessarily, but given everything else we're talking about Epstein, intelligence, the sex crimes, all of that, it starts to look kind of, weird, this far back. But, obviously over time it gets...
Can you do me a favor and just pull up the following? Pull up the text I just sent you. And the only reason I'm showing this is because I know the folks at YouTube value Snopes because they want things to be looked at. And you know how, if you can pull that up. But while you're doing that, the strange part of the story is the fact that the person that ends up putting Epstein in jail is Donald Barr's son, William Barr.
Well, at this exact time when Donald Barr hires Jeffrey Epstein and all of this is going on at the Dalton School, William Barr is already at the CIA.
William Barr's already at the CIA.
Mm-hmm. That's where he started his career pretty much.
In 73, 74.
I think it was after. Well, so Epstein, I think it started in 74. So as I mentioned earlier, Donald Barr made hiring decisions in the spring, leaves that summer, and then Epstein starts that fall semester. And in the same period of time, William Barr's already associated with the CIA,
So for the folks at YouTube and others, here's Snopes. Okay, so we're fact-checking this. Did Bill Barr's father mentor Jeffrey Epstein and write a bizarre novel?
Okay, so if I can comment on that, we're not talking. I didn't say anything right now. We haven't said anything about there being a mentor relationship. Right, it was a hiring decision.
Right.
So a lot of times with these fact check sites, they'll put in like, "Oh, there was no mentor relationship," and then they debunk the whole thing. But Donald Barr did write a bizarre novel. Yeah, and he did hire Jeffrey Epstein.
Can you pull up a little bit?
Those are facts right there.
Hang on. But let's see what these guys are saying, because these guys, people follow these guys. Mostly false. So go up. So, okay, down at the top, let me read that one first. Claim. Donald Barr, father of U.S. General Bill Barr, hired Jeffrey Epstein as a teacher, served as his mentor, and wrote a novel about men raping teenage girls. Okay, go to the bottom. Mostly false. What's true? Donald Barr was headmaster of Dalton School in New York until the summer of 74. In 74, Epstein began working as a math and physics professor at the school. In 1973, Barr published a science fiction novel that contained several prominent references to and descriptions of rape and sexual slavery. What's false is Dalton is not an all-girls school and was not so when Epstein worked there. The claim that Barr was Epstein's mentor appears to be more than an idle speculations unsupported by evidence. Barr's novel does not celebrate slavery or sexual violence against underage girls, and in one instance, the protagonist brutal murders another character to avenge the rape of a teenage girl.
Right. So I wasn't familiar with the date of the publication of the book, but I knew it was around the ballpark, the same time that he's hiring Epstein, so I didn't know it was earlier, but I've never heard the claim that it was an all-girls school. As far as I understand, it was at this time.
I mean, who would want to write a book like that?
Both genders. But I haven't read the book. I've only read parts of it, but from what I understand, there is like a sex slavery thing, but not necessarily for like minors, right? But it is an odd book, to be sure.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.